So recently we've had a few articles floating about on the internet surrounding the next Battlefield installment, and although there's obviously no official word on what they've been talking about, they do come from fairly reputable sources, namely one article that I'm going to be talking about today from Tom Henderson, who, outside of a few bits of wrong information here and there, has mostly been right about Battlefield in the past. And so today I wanted to let you guys know what he's been talking about in regards to the next Battlefield game. We are obviously quite a while away still from the next Battlefield, but if you guys are enjoying the Battlefield content and you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm still going to be covering Battlefield once a week or once a fortnight in the lead up to kind of just getting some information early next year, at which point I will definitely be kicking back into full gear in the lead up to that next Battlefield game. Now, reading through this article, and I will leave the link down below for those of you who want to read through the article yourself, it pretty much starts off just sort of saying how Battlefield fans are obviously a bit apprehensive and concerned at the moment just based on the previous two installments into the franchise, and that I guess we are all just a little bit concerned that this next game is just going to be yet another failed launch. And I do think that is a pretty fair assessment after 2042. Even for myself, I did pretty much enjoy the very large majority of that game's journey. It definitely had some rough spots, of course, but I did enjoy it for the most part, and yet I still don't want a repeat of that in the next game. I very much want this game to be back to what Battlefield used to be, the Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and Battlefield 1 era that really was that peak of the franchise, and I really want the next one to just be a more similar game to that, rather than 2042 being obviously a lot different and a lot more out there. Now, in that IGN interview a few months back now with Vince Zampella, he did mention that the franchise is going to go back to its roots, which, like I said, that's kind of what I want, and I feel like that is pretty much what the large majority of the community wants. Just a more safe, regular Battlefield game to kind of get us back on track, because I think a third failed game in a row would be pretty devastating for the franchise if 2042 wasn't already devastating. Now, Tom Henderson continued on in the article mentioning how heavily this game is being backed by EA. He says, on a funding front, the next Battlefield has the most resources in the franchise's history. 4 studios are currently working on Battlefield: DICE, Motive, Criterion Games, and Ripple Effect. More importantly, EA and its studios seem more interested in gaining player feedback this time around. Now, not only is there obviously those 4 studios in DICE, Motive, Criterion, and Ripple Effect, all 4 of which have worked on Battlefield in the past, but they've also had an extra year of development than normal, or at least they will have had an extra year by the time it launches late next year, if that is in fact the date. There is no confirmation of that just yet, but we have to assume it's probably launching September, October, November, somewhere in that time period, and at that point it will be 4 years since the last Battlefield. Now, games in the past used to have only about a 2-year cycle. They did eventually then move to 3-year cycles, I think, with maybe Battlefield 5. In fact, no, Battlefield 5 even had a 2-year cycle. Battlefield 1 was 2016 and Battlefield 5 was 2018. So even for 2042, they actually then moved that to a 3-year cycle. But then, like I said, this one is going to be launching late in 2025. And 2042 launched in November of 2021. So that will be 4 years since the previous game, which, like I said, is essentially double of what we used to get. And I think that is very much needed. I think they really need to let this one cook. If they rush it out, I just feel like it's going to be destined to fail. It's going to have bugs and it's not going to be finished, which is obviously a very common trend these days in not only the shooter genre, but just the entire gaming industry at this point. Now, anyway, getting to, I guess, the crux of this article, he went on to say, sources say that playtests with external players are happening much more frequently than in past installments, and the amount of data and feedback collected is the most the franchise has seen in its history. From small feedback sessions to large-scale player tests, Battlefield is now taking the much-needed player-first approach. It's an approach that we'll see continued to be played out coming to the start of the year, as it's understood that EA and its studios have been eyeing up the return of the Battlefield community test environment, but to what scale that's incorporated at this time is unclear. All in all, Battlefield seems to be trying to mend the mistakes it's made, and with a return to a modern military shooter with destruction, 4 classes, and 64 player battles, EA could have a win on its hands. That being said, we're still a year-ish from release and things can change, but so far at least, Battlefield could be back. Now, that's all pretty positive actually from Tom Henderson. He is generally known as a little bit more, I don't want to say negative, but he's just a bit more of a realist, I guess. He generally calls stuff out when it is not in a good state. He was doing that with 2042 before it launched, and he tends to be just very blunt about what he thinks. If he thinks something looks like it's going to suck, he will straight up say that. So the fact that he is being a bit more positive is hopefully a good sign for the game. Now, obviously, it's still a very long way away, so we need to all make sure we're not getting our hopes up too much, because that has really burned us in the past. But I do think, like he said in the article, as of right now, it is definitely all looking good anyway. Now, just to wrap it up, I do have a few quick thoughts on not only the playtesting stuff, but the CTE, or the community test environment. First and foremost, with the CTE, I think that is a really good idea. For those who don't know what that was, I think the last game to have it was Battlefield 4. I could be wrong, so please do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But yeah, I think Battlefield 4 was the last game to have this. And what this was is almost like a secondary version of the game. So through Steam, or I guess realistically it's actually through the EA app, you kind of have the actual official version of the game, but then there is the CTE, which is essentially free to download, and it is almost just like an ongoing like alpha or beta of the game. So it's not the official launch, and it's where they'll add stuff in. So they'll add new weapons, they'll add, you know, different modes and maps and stuff like that before it actually launches into the official game. It is almost like a just constant beta that's going on in the background. Now, I don't believe it was always going on. I think they just kind of run it every now and then. So I don't think it's a permanent thing. I actually can't remember, because keep in mind that game was like about 11 or 12 years ago now. So I actually genuinely can't remember how it worked. But essentially the CTE is like a beta that actually goes on during the launch of the game. Obviously, we all know that betas and alphas for games usually come out before the game to give players hands-on and get a bit of feedback and stuff, and then the game launches and we never really see that again. But the CTE is almost like during season 1, they'll just like have an extra little beta that might be buggy and it might have issues, but it kind of takes that away from the actual official version of the game, if that makes sense. So I'm very much down for that coming back. Now, I don't know if that's going to be just after launch. I don't think it makes sense to have that prior to launch personally, because then it is essentially just early access. Then again, having a year of early access to the next Battlefield that's free, and it's, you know, they advertise it's going to be buggy, just let us know all your feedback and stuff, and we get a year of hands-on for free beforehand. I'm actually not against that either, so that honestly could work, but I'm going to assume the CTE stuff is more talking about post-launch to keep that feedback loop going on. In terms though of just the overall playtesting stuff that was mentioned in this article, I also think that is a very good idea. I think people should be getting hands-on with the game as much as possible, get as many people on board. Obviously they do the pretty much daily playtests within the studio itself, but man, do some early alphas and stuff like that, like in the beginning of 2025, nearly a year before the game comes out. Get the game into the hands of players, let them know that yes, this is a very early stage, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be issues, that's why we're letting you play it, so that we can fix those before the actual launch. Because like I said, I really do think that if this game launches in a poor state, that is going to be really devastating for Battlefield. I don't know if they can really come back from that. I think it would take something astronomical to ever get Battlefield back to where it was if the next game is also not very good. So I'm very interested to see how that goes. I'm curious to see if any of this is going to be public or if it's all going to be behind closed doors like it normally is. Personally, I would love for them to do some like public early access stuff just so that everyone can experience it. The more feedback you get, the better the end result is going to be. But with it being EA, I dare say it's all going to be behind closed doors until the regular open betas and stuff, which will be closer to launch. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they do some public stuff a lot earlier on, and even just like advertising the game earlier and stuff. Let us know what it's about, show us the setting, show us some cool features and stuff like that. Get people hyped, because it has been, like I said, over 3 years now since the previous Battlefield, and by the time this launches it will be 4 years. That is a very long time. So I think us as the Battlefield player base, we're hungry. We need something to be excited about. So I'm curious to see how their overall marketing and this whole playtesting thing goes throughout 2025. But that is going to do it for this one, guys. Like I said, if you're interested in more Battlefield content, I will be doing weekly or fortnightly videos, just going over some rumors and news and speculation and that sort of thing until we do finally get some official news, at which point I will definitely ramp things up. So like I said, if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on all that Battlefield content. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.